All right. What's going on?
So I got All Out Assault. Uh, it's an enchantment. I recently pulled it. One of the guy I played one time, and they told me in order to get the second combat phase, I need to play it on the second main phase, and it would untap my creatures, and I can attack with them again. And then I
Uh,
played.
let, let's see. All Out Assault. It's 2 red, white, and black. It's an enchantment. Creatures you control +1. When it enters, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase, followed by the additional main phase. When you next attack this turn, untap each creature you control. Okay. So go ahead. They were saying you had to do it in your second main phase to get use out of it.
Correct. And then the second time I played it, they told me it was a different group of people. They said that
Right.
I played it on my second main phase, but the creatures already attacked with, they don't untap.
Yeah. So here's the situation that I think some of those people were comparing it to. So there's a creature that had a landfall trigger for additional combats that when it first came out, pretty much everybody was playing it wrong. And some people and a lot of people when they first start using it even now will probably use it incorrectly the first time that they use it. And it's this creature Moraug. And what Moraug does, it says that basically has a landfall trigger to give you an additional combat, and you untap your creatures during that additional combat, right? So what'll
Mhm.
happen is if you did it in your first main phase, you would immediately go into your additional combat before you went into your regular combat. So you would untap your creatures during the additional combat, they would attack, and then they would be tapped by the time you went to your regular combat. Right? So then you wouldn't really get to use them during, both of those combats. So what they figured out you had to do is to play your land during your second main phase. That way you have already attacked, and then the additional combat that you got from this trigger would untap your creatures so that you could attack with them. You get full use out of both of those combats. And I think a lot of people saw this and thought of it the same way of like, oh, okay, wizard, you're not going to fool me twice. Like I'm gonna make sure to use it in the second main phase and they just immediately think it works the same way, right? But
Mhm.
what's happening with All Out Assault is All Out Assault is it's doing a couple things. So when All Out Assault enters, if it's your main phase, it creates an additional combat phase after the current main phase you're in, and then you get another main phase after that. So if you play this in your first main phase, you'll get the main phase you're in, you'll get combat, the extra combat that it gives you, an additional main phase, and then your normal combat that you would have gotten for turn, and then you'll go into your second main phase, your post combat main phase, right? But unlike so many other additional combat abilities, it doesn't untap your creatures either right away or even at the beginning of that additional combat. It creates a delayed trigger that says when you next attack. So not at the beginning of that combat, just when you attack. When next time this turn, untap each creature you control. So what happens is the optimal play is that let's say you mistook it for the Moraug effect, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna big brain this, and I'm gonna play it in my second main phase, and then that's gonna get you an extra combat, but it doesn't untap your creatures at the start of that combat. It now gives it an attack trigger that when you attack, you untap all your creatures. So anything that was tapped from your regular combat, you just can't attack with, right? So now you have to do it in your first main phase, and then when you attack during that additional combat that it gives you, as an attack trigger, it will untap those creatures, or all of your creatures rather. And then when you leave that extra combat and you go into the extra main phase it gave you, and then you go into your normal combat phase, your creatures are untapped, ready to attack again.
Okay, so ideally, I what so I have this dragon deck. When would be the best time? So like I have the Dragon, and
Right.
so you
So if you want to get to use it during, or if you want to get to use the extra combat to its full effect, have that enchantment enter the battlefield during your first main phase.
okay.
And then what will happen is it'll give you an additional combat that starts after the main phase you're currently in. And when you attack during that additional combat, you will untap all of your creatures. So then when you leave that combat and you go into the additional main phase it gives you, and then you go into your normal combat that was supposed to happen that turn, your creatures are untapped, ready to go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. What's your question?
So, say I have an Icetill Explorer, a card that
landfall,
allows me-
mill a card, and you can play lands from your graveyard, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But basically any card that lets me play an additional land.
Rumming Up Excavator, Crucible of Worlds, so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I play 2 lands. Sack the Icetill Explorer and return it with Reanimate or something.
Okay.
Would I be allowed to play in an additional land again?
Gotcha. Okay, hang on. Let me double check one thing. Icetill Explorer. Oh, Icetill Explorer does give you the ability to play an additional land on each of your turns. Okay, so here's the thing though, is that effects that say you may play an additional land, it doesn't reset. Right? So like what happens is normally you can only play a single land on your turn. Right?
Mhm.
That's just the normal game rules. And then you have the Icetill Explorer in play, and now the game just knows, oh, you have permission to play up to 2 lands this turn. Great. Icetill leaves the battlefield, and the game goes, oh, we're back down to 1. Right? You only have permission to play 1 land this turn. And then Icetill now it won't like undo additional lands that you've played, right? So you played your 2 lands, and then Icetill leaves, and the game says, oh, you're only limited to 1 this turn, so you can't play any additionals. Icetill comes back, it just brings it back up to 2, right? But the game knows you've already played 2 lands that turn, so you can't play an additional beyond that, right? So it's just in real time changing the number of lands that you have permission to play that turn. It's not giving you permission to play an extra land beyond that, right? It's not like when this enters you may play an additional land this turn, then it would continue to reset, right? But it's just normally you're limited to 1, and then while it's in play you're limited to 2. If it's not in play you're limited to 1. If it comes back into play you're still only limited to 2, right? And the game remembers how many lands you've played that turn.
Mm-hmm.
So in your scenario, you have Icetill in play, you play 2 lands, Icetill leaves the battlefield, comes back into play, you're still limited to 2 lands, and you've already played 2 lands, so you don't have permission to play an additional land.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yep, that was one question. Thanks.
No problem. All right, go ahead. What's up?
All right, so I play Sephiroth, Fabled Soldier, as one of my commanders, and so one of my friends has a card. I don't exactly remember the name, but it says whenever a creature dies, it would go to exile. So does that completely negate Sephiroth's attack, like thing or trigger?
You're talking about the one that would It depends on the way that their effect is worded, right? So Sephiroth says whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life, and then if it's the 4th time that it resolved, he transforms. If somebody has an effect that says when a creature dies, exile it from the graveyard, that creature still died, right? It went from the battlefield to the graveyard, and anything that cared about it dying still gets to happen, any relevant triggers. If the effect says if a creature or a creature card would go to the graveyard or would die, exile it instead, that's a replacement effect that says you don't get to go to the graveyard, you go to exile instead, and so it doesn't trigger any dies triggers. So if the effect is a trigger that sees it die and then exiles it from the graveyard, it still triggered all the other dice triggers. But if the effect is a replacement effect, like you would find on Leyline of the Void or Dalthy Voidwalker or stuff like that, there's a number of other things that do the same thing. But if it's on anything like that, that's a replacement effect that keeps it from touching the graveyard in the first place, so it doesn't get any dice trigger.
Okay, because here, I'll try and search up the actual creature that it is.
Mhm.
So, I don't exactly know what it's called. I know it's like a black creature, and it's like... Put into Scryfall.
There you go. It says it's a black creature that says if a creature dies, exile it.
It's something along the line, but I need to know. I guess in this case, I would need to know which one it says. Then.
Yeah, exactly. And so it says like when a creature an opponent controls dies or something like that, or...
I think it just says when a creature dies. Here, I'll paste that in and see what it comes. Yeah. So it's if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So that would mean that I wouldn't get the die trigger?
Correct, right. So what happens is a trigger is always noted with the word when, whenever, or at. Right? So when a creature dies, whenever you draw a card, at the beginning of combat, these are triggers that look for something to happen and then put something on the stack immediately afterwards, right? A replacement effect almost always uses the word instead. And what happens is right before the thing would happen, the replacement effect changes it. Right? So in this instance, it would be right before that non-token creature would go to the graveyard. It says, instead, I'm changing it from going to the graveyard to going to exile. And so since it's going directly from the battlefield to exile, it doesn't officially die.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so something like Living Death would go around that effect then?
No, because Living Death tells everyone to sacrifice their creatures. Sacrifice tries to put it from the battlefield to the graveyard.
Okay.
But, so... While many things that sacrifice do die, there's a possibility that a replacement effect would change where it goes. So you still sacrificed it. So anything that says like when a player sacrifices a permanent, put a 1/1 counter on all your creatures, it'll see everything get sacrificed. But even though they didn't get to go to the graveyard in that instance with the replacement effect, they were still sacrificed, they just didn't die.
Okay. And then also, so you're familiar with Echoes of Eternity, correct?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
So I had a Commander game where my friend copied Echoes of Eternity, and then does that just end the game?
No.
He said that it did.
No. Echoes of it. So he's talking about where Echoes of Eternity says like if a certain thing happens, it happens in additional time, right? Like.
Yeah.
I think it's like if a triggered ability of a colorless permanent or if like a colorless spell, you copy it and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So remember what we just said about triggers, right? Triggers is when, whenever, at. So when something happens, this other thing happens, right? So for example, one of the most well-known kind of two cards that bounce off of each other is Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond, right? One of them says when an opponent loses life, you gain life. The other one says when you gain life, an opponent loses life. So they would trigger, like one would see your opponent lose life and go, oh, cool, I'm going to gain you life. The other one sees you gain life and says, hey, I have a trigger to make someone lose life. And then the other one sees that trigger and they bounce off of each other. What's happening here with Echoes of Eternity is not a trigger. Okay, because remember, it's not using the words when, whenever, or at. In fact, it's not even a replacement effect technically. So any of the effects that exist that say, if this thing would trigger, it triggers an additional time. So Echoes of Eternity, Panharmonicon, Roaming Throne, Wolfgar, Ishin, all these things that exist that say if this type of trigger would happen, it triggers an additional time. That ability itself is not a trigger. That is a static effect that changes the rules for how certain types of triggers work. So with a single Echoes of Eternity in play, when the triggering event that it looks for, so I think it's a trigger, it's a trigger of a colorless permanent or a colorless spell, things like that, right?
Yep.
Echoes of Eternity says, oh, hey, you're about to put a trigger on the stack. Put an additional one instead. Not instead, but as well, right? Like it changed the rule of how triggers work. And so having two Echoes of Eternities would say, oh, hey, this trigger is about to go on the stack, and each of them is adding one to the number of triggers that go on the stack. So now you're putting 3 on the stack instead of just 1 with two Echoes of Eternity, but they don't see each other because each of their effect itself is not a trigger. Right, so one Echoes of Eternity doesn't see the other one because the other one is not triggering, it's just changed the rules of how triggers work.
Oh, okay. But for the second line, each of them can trigger that, because it says whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it. Would one Echoes of Eternity see the trigger of the other one?
It would, so here's the weird thing, right? So normally with one Echoes of Eternity, it says, and I think it says, if a triggered ability of another colorless permanent would triggers, right? So it doesn't cause its own trigger to happen a second time, right?
No, I'm saying if
No,
you
I
have
know, but
two-
what I'm saying is that first part, right? The hold on, let me get the actual text for Echoes of Eternity. All right, there it is.
What's up, guys?
Hey, what's going on, man? So, yeah, if a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control, right? So, when you cast that colorless spell, Echoes of Eternity triggers its second ability. Its first ability doesn't see it because it says another colorless permanent you control, right? So, it is going to trigger to copy the colorless spell on the stack. Now, here's the thing. With two Echoes of Eternity in play, you cast a colorless spell. Doesn't matter what it is for the purpose of this example. What happens is they both see that colorless spell, and so both of them, their second ability wants to trigger to copy that spell, right? But they also both see each other as, for their first ability, as another colorless permanent triggering. And so what happens is the first one will trigger twice because its original trigger plus the one the second one is giving it. And the second one will trigger twice because of its trigger and the additional trigger the first one is giving it. So you will copy that spell 4 times with two Echoes of Eternity in play.
Okay, so instead of them infinitely comboing, because when my friend had done it, he said that one would trigger the other, and then it would just result in a tie because nothing could happen.
Right, because I think your friend is understanding that first ability as a trigger, even though it's not. That first ability just changed the rules of how triggers work, but it itself is not a trigger.
So I was playing a game of Commander with my brother yesterday. I got this new commander, Dhalsim.
Dhalsim from the Street Fighter
Dhalsim.
Secret Lair.
Yeah. So he has an ability here. Whenever a creature you control with reach attacks, untap it, and it can't be blocked by creatures with greater power in this combat. So the scenario was, let's just have some creatures out here.
Spell Dhalsim for me. I'm trying to look it up, and I'm getting it wrong.
Dhalsim.
DHA. That's
Dhalsim.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'll get some creatures on the board here as an example. Okay, so let's say I have these two with reach. I have Dhalsim out. So the scenario was we were trying to figure out his ability of the untapping portion so going into like combat phase, right? So I declare attackers and they do tap, like everything would tap that I'm attacking with.
Mm-hmm.
And then do they immediately untap, or is it once the combat damage is assigned, they untap?
Gotcha. Okay, so let's see. Whenever a creature you control with reach attacks, untap it and it can't be blocked by creatures. Okay, yeah. So what happens is, of course, combat is broken up into several steps, right? You've got,
Right.
beginning of combat, declare attackers, declare blockers, damage, end of combat. Inside of each of those steps, players get priority to take actions. If there's triggers that happen, those triggers get priority passes and everything. And this is all before moving to the next step, right? So when you declare attackers, if declaring any of those creatures as attacking causes a trigger to go on the stack, we have to resolve that trigger. We have to handle that before we can move forward in any way. Right. So, or at least to the next step or phase. So Dhalsim says whenever let me get the text back in front of me. Whenever a creature you control with reach attacks, do the thing, right? So you've declared your attackers. You said like 3 different creatures that all have reach, right? So you tap them to attack. And then Dhalsim sees each one of those and puts 3 triggers on the stack, one for each of them, saying untap this creature and it can't be blocked by creatures with, I think, greater power, is that right? Greater power this combat. That all gets to resolve, or at least priority passes, and assuming nobody stops it, nobody stifles it, or does anything weird. Those
Okay,
those
that was the thing. My brother's like, if they tap, or if they stay tapped while declaring attacking, he would have a response. But I was not sure.
He has an opportunity to respond before they would untap. Now, removing Dhalsim, for example, though, does not stop those triggers from resolving. The trigger's on the stack and it's independent of the source. He would have to have something that specifically says counter target triggered ability, or all abilities on the stack, or something like that, once those triggers got put on the stack. And each of those triggers is separate. So he would have to either target each of those 3 triggers separately, or have something that just affects all of the triggers at the same time. I think like whirlwind denial, stuff like that. And then so what'll happen though is if there's no meaningful interaction here, those triggers resolve, they untap, and they can't be blocked by creatures with greater power until this combat. And so now we move to declare blockers. So by the time you go to blockers, yeah, they're untapped and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power.
Got it. Okay, so he would have been able to do something. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, he would have been able to respond before they untap. Yeah.
Because he's like, if I can't, we tried looking it up online yesterday. We couldn't find anything on it. He's like, if I can't do anything, I lose. But if I can do something while they're tapped, like if they're tapped at any point.
Yeah. Oh, like he had a thing that says like destroy target tapped creature or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't check what card he had, but he's like
a royal assassin or things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to kind of help clarify, and this might help with future situations like that, right? Every step of the game follows the same pattern, and this will kind of help you understand like when the points of interaction are and things like that, right? And now the only exception is like nobody gets priority to do anything during the untap step, and normally nobody can do anything during cleanup, and there are some minor exceptions, but those are corner cases. But generally, every step will start with a turn-based action if there is one. So, for example, in the declare attackers step, declaring your attackers is a turn-based action, right? Like that just happens before any new triggers, before any players get priority. Once you are in the declare attacker step, turn-based action is to declare all your attackers, right? Then if there's any triggers that go on the stack, those go, and then players get priority to resolve those triggers, right? And then we go to the active player, the player whose turn it is, has priority, right? And they either take an action. So they could say, yeah, I've attacked with these creatures, but now before we go to blockers, I want to do this thing. And if they take an action, players get priority, the opportunity to respond. If they don't take an action, or once priority is done, once we've handled all of this, then the next thing is the active player can propose moving to the next step, right? They say, okay, I'm ready to go 2 blockers if you're in the attack step, for example, right? When they do that, it doesn't automatically move. Players have to pass priority without taking an action in order to move to the next step or phase. So they've declared their attackers, they've done everything they're going to do, and they go, I want to go to blockers. You have the opportunity to say, well, before we go to blockers, I want to swords that creature or whatever, right? And then if you do that, then we're back to this point where active player has priority. They have to again propose to move to the next step or phase. But once they do that and nobody responds, then the game officially moves to the next step or phase and goes back to this first part here. So then you go to declare blockers step, where the turn-based action is declaring all your blockers. If there's triggers, players get priority. If there's not triggers, active player has priority, can take an action, we pass priority. If they don't take an action, or if they take the action and that resolves, then they get priority to propose moving to the next step or phase, and so on. So every step or phase moves this way. So in Dhalsim's situation is turn-based action, declare attackers. You've declared your attackers, then we go to triggers. So the triggers go onto the stack. Before those triggers resolve, players get priority to take actions. That's where your opponent, I think you said your brother, could do the thing that says like destroy target tapped creature before that trigger resolves to untap it.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then so after that priority goes to AP, or what was it again? Like
active player.
Active player.
Yeah. The player whose turn
So
it is.
at
Basically.
that stage, then it would come when it comes back to my priority. I can do the trigger resolves.
Well, so what'll happen is, if the triggers went onto the stack, and then players got priority. Now, if somebody, like I said, your brother says, while I have priority, I want to destroy target tapped creature. That goes onto the stack, and you have the option to respond when you get priority. You can say, well, in response, I'm going to give that creature protection from black, or whatever, to stop that, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, nothing in this game gets to happen without players getting priority at all. Right, and so then, but then once that's done, and all of the responses have happened, and it goes back to the triggers on the stack, the triggers start to every time that we go back to that trigger, it priority passes again until priority passes on that trigger without anybody responding.